We need is simply for people to wake up and just use their highly advanced rational skills, which all doctors have got, and just look at the data and make their own decision based on the data that they see with their own eyes. They all see the adverse reactions happening, but the cloud of propaganda and emotional coercion that they're all living under, it dampens their own minds.
Minutes, 15 seconds.
Vehicle flight pressures.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Hello and welcome, independent researchers, skeptics, and all of humankind, to Shadow Citizen. Shadow Citizen will explore the shadows of an alternate reality. Your hosts, Rachael L. McIntosh.
Well, all right, everybody, we made it through another week. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And today on Shadow Citizen, we have, I'm very excited about this guest, Craig. How do I say your last name? Yes. Thank you so much. And he is with a website that I discovered the other day. How bad is my batch? And
That's
this, right. Yes. And this, we'll have all the links to the website underneath. I was fascinated by this website because here I am in Rhode Island, USA, where they're making people show vaccination cards and booster shot records in order to see the local tourist attractions. Schools are doing things like all the universities, Brown University and Providence College now, everybody has to go get boosters. So I saw this website, How Bad Is My Batch? And it kind of astounded me, showed it to my friends. They were astounded. And so I'm very, very excited to talk to this person today. Thank you so much for being with us, Craig. Craig, tell us about you. Tell us about what made you want to do How Bad Is My Batch? And just go.
Well, we discovered a large amount of variation between batches in terms of the number of adverse effects that they produce. Some batches produce 5,000 adverse effects, and others only produce 10 or 15. So the magnitude of the difference is 100-fold. So some batches are about 100 times more damaging than other batches. And being as there was such great variation, it occurred to me that people should be informed of that. And the easiest way to do that is just provide a tool so they can put in their batch code and read off the number of deaths, number of disabilities, and number of life-threatening illnesses associated with that particular batch. And then they can make an informed decision. So I see it as important also for nurses and doctors who are prescribing these vaccines, that they should look up the batch code that they're about to prescribe to a lot of people prior to administering the vaccine, so they themselves can understand whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to actually vaccinate people with a particular batch. And the same applies to anyone involved in the enforcement of vaccines, such as employers. Employers should realize that by mandating the vaccine so people can work, they should be made aware that what they're really mandating is possible death and possible disability. So it's very important for employers as well to actually see the variation between the batches. So I created a simple tool which is updated every month with the latest batches, so people can see the harm associated with the latest batches, and hopefully this will prevent people from making a mistake, so they will become aware and alerted early on to the emergence of any batches which start producing harm. So unfortunately, the government hasn't provided this kind of handy tool. So it's down to computer people like myself to try and provide this to protect people. And that's basically why I created it.
And I'm glad you did. I'm so glad you did. Now, I noticed up in the header of the website, you have it listed different, like you have the American farm, you got the Pfizer, Moderna, the Johnson & Johnson one. Then you've got the UK, you got Europe, or out of the US. You saw a difference in the batches that were in Europe and the US. We'll start from that. Okay, so now we've got, how bad is my batch on here? Now you want me to go to, oh, here's your team. There's you. See, everybody, this is why I couldn't say his last name right there. That's Craig we're dealing with right now. All right, you want me to go over to geography?
Yes, it's at the top in the second line down.
Under Moderna, okay. Yeah. We're going to geography. Let's see what happens.
Good. Now, if you scroll down just a tiny bit so we can see the screen, Moderna in the USA is the first table. So go up a bit. That's Moderna outside. You're going down too far.
Oh, yeah.
Just stop at the, go up a bit more. And just capture the first table, chart 1, that's right.
Okay.
Now this is Moderna's deployment in the USA, and here are listed the most toxic 20 batches of Moderna. Now, not all of these are still in circulation, but this is a historical record of their most toxic 20 batches. And as you can see, the batches are recorded together with their adverse reactions, which is what ADR stands for, deaths, disabilities, and life-threatening illnesses associated with each batch. And what you can see, looking at the death and disabilities, is that the deaths are actually higher than the disabilities mostly for the Moderna in the USA. So pharma here is deploying vaccines, which generally for Moderna seem to have produced more deaths than disabilities. Now, if we go down to chart 2, please.
Sure.
That's fine. Now, Moderna also deploys outside the USA, and the striking difference here is now the deaths have been massively reduced. So they've literally dropped by about 100-fold. However, disabilities have gone right up, and they are much higher than deaths. So what's happening here is there's been a shift in the effects of the vaccine. No longer producing death, they now produce much more disability. Now, we have to bear in mind that people in Europe and people in South America and people in Asia, they are similar to the people that live in America. They're not that physically different. So how can we account for this massive swing in the effects of the vaccines from death to disability? It's it's a very striking difference. And now if we go a bit down to chart 3, please, to look at Pfizer. This is Pfizer in the USA. Pfizer in the USA, again, the top 20 batches for 2021 for Pfizer are these. These are the most toxic batches for 2021. And as you can see, again, you've got the adverse reactions, deaths, disabilities, life-threatening illnesses. But looking at deaths and disabilities, we can see an approximate equality between death and disability for the batches, the Pfizer batches within the USA. It's more or less the same. I don't think there's much difference between death and disability for Pfizer in the USA. If we go down to chart 4, please. Pfizer outside of the USA, again, we have a very interesting shift. What we have is, for example, disabilities increasing and deaths decreasing. So you can see that 235 disabilities compared to 19 deaths, 149 compared to 6, 125 compared to 73, 183 compared to 9, 113 compared to 4, 98 compared to 6, 150 compared to 37, 73 compared to 1, 163 compared to 90, 76 compared to 12, and so on. 80 compared to 0, 123 compared to 2, 66 compared to 0, 91 compared to 48. Overall, there's a big shift in the increase in disabilities for Pfizer vaccines outside of the USA. Now, it's doubtful that these differences can be attributed to demography. What pharma seem to be doing is applying death to the US citizens and applying disability to foreign countries. Basically, they seem to be exporting disability. Now, it's odd for us to think of disability as an export, but when you think about what medicine actually is, medicine is what they are exporting to cure the disability. So essentially, chronic illness provides a better income stream compared to sudden death. I mean, pharma can't make any money from a sudden death.
That's right.
Caretakers can, maybe coroners can, but pharma can't. No. It's just a done deal, and their income stream stops dead when there's a sudden death. However, disability affords them a vast, huge income stream. They cannot induce disability in their own population, however, for a number of reasons. One reason is that crippling one's friends, neighbors, and family members is going to lead to breakdown. It's going to lead to leaks in the Moderna and Pfizer companies. They wouldn't be able to keep a lid on it. Someone would say something, leak documents, etc. Also, it opens them up to prosecution, because it's one thing to cause damage in a South American country and have people who are very remote unable to sue a company in America. It's another thing to have well-educated, informed citizens in America suing Moderna and Pfizer. So they're trying to steer clear of causing long-term chronic illness in the States. And the final thing is, the American government doesn't really want to foot an enormous social care bill for looking after all of the disabled people that are created by this. However, if the pharma companies induce disability abroad, then not a single penny of American taxpayers' money, government's money, needs to be spent on looking after those people. They are simply a gold mine. And I suspect that the disabilities induced in foreign countries by these vaccines is going to be focused in the richer European countries, so they can harvest as much money from the resulting disabled people as they can. Because it's only the rich countries that can afford to pay the vast bills that will.
That's right. That's right.
And they'll be paying it for the rest of their lives. So it will be, anyway, that's a summary of this. Obviously, what I've said is how it appears. It doesn't mean that I have proved it, but it looks intriguing, and it looks very strange that human beings in America are affected in one way, and then mysteriously people in foreign countries are affected by the vaccines deployed there in a very different way. And if we go to, if we look at the batch number, if we look at the, if we go to chart 3, please.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Now you notice that here in chart 3, within the USA, we have 51 disabilities out of 3,412 adverse reaction reports. Now, if we calculated what that is as a percentage, it would be 51 divided by 3,412, which works out at 1.5%. So 1.5% of the reports coming in for Pfizer vaccinations are reports of disability. That's 1.5% in the USA. Now let's go down to chart 4, please. That's it. Now here we have 136 disabilities out of 2,506 adverse reaction reports. So that's 136. And if we divide that by 2,506, we end up with 5.4%. So 1.5% is the percentage of reports within the USA resulting in disability for that particular batch. Outside the USA, we have 5.4%. And in fact, if we did the same calculation for outside the USA, we would see that the percentage of disabilities, the percentage of the adverse reports that are disabilities is as high as 20% in some cases. That's 1 in 5 people crippled for life, 1 in 5. Now, compare that to America, where the percentage of disabilities varies between 0.5% and 1.5%. You can see there's like a striking difference. It's yet to be investigated. This is yet another example of the variation in the vaccines. Variation. All vaccines are meant to be consistent. All medicines are meant to be consistent. They're not meant to vary by huge amounts. The only reason Pfizer and Moderna got their emergency use authorization is because they promised that their drugs were safe and effective and consistent. They weren't meant to be 5,000 times more toxic than some other batches. They weren't meant to kill 100 times more people than some other batches. And they weren't meant to disable hundreds more people than other batches. They were meant to be consistent. And this is evidence that they're not consistent. And other people whom I work with have found and come to exactly the same conclusion. We have professors at Indiana University. We have biotech CEOs who've analyzed the data. We have doctors and even ex heads of Pfizer's research who have come out to say, yes, these vaccines are varying from one batch to another by very, very large margins, and it's not consistent at all. So what I'm saying to people is just be cautious. If you're going to take a vaccine, check first to make sure you know how many people have died and been disabled by that vaccine. Don't just jump in and assume that they're all exactly the same. They're not. In no way are they all the same.
I have a question. First,
Yeah.
my very first question is, as somebody, like say my job's gonna fire me if I don't get a vaccine. Is there a better vaccine to take than the others? And if next question followed with that, how do I know as the consumer of this vaccine which batch I'm getting? It's obviously on the little bottle, but can I order up from a certain batch, or is it just like I just get the luck of the draw?
Well, actually, you should be able to reject a particular batch if you feel that it's dangerous, because they can't. They even if the government mandates a vaccine, they're claiming themselves that all the vaccines are the same in toxicity. So it shouldn't matter whether you have one batch or another. All batches are supposed to be equal. Right. So if they're saying to you, oh no, you've got to have a particular batch, that's a warning sign that they themselves know that they're not all equal, and they want to administer to you a particular substance to get a particular effect that you wouldn't get otherwise. So that's a very dangerous signal if they are actually earmarking people for particular batches. That's a very dangerous signal.
How would I know, though? How would I know?
Well,
how would I know?
Well, all you can do is if a person goes to have a vaccine, they should ask to see the bottle, and then they should make a note of the actual batch code and put it into the app on their phone. It's simple as that. To be honest, once you know the large amount of variation, people should be cautious of all the batches in general, but especially fearful of the dangerous ones. So what you can do is try and...
I saw one that I think it was Moderna. Like, let's go over here up to the top here. You have, wasn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Was the most severe? Here we go. So we go to the most severe. All right.
Yeah.
So here we are at the most severe, and you can put your batch code in right here, and you could.
Yeah, this will only give you the 2,000 out of 2,000 that have been identified of causing one of the severe reactions, such as death, disability, emergency room visit, life-threatening illness. They're ranked according to ADRs, which is adverse reactions. So the ones higher up are going to be the worst. In general, as the alphabet, if you look at the code for the first one, 039K20A, you'll notice that the end of the code says 20A. Now, if you look down that list, you'll see that all the ones at the top, a lot of them end in 20A. And when we take just the Moderna, because this is Moderna and Pfizer and Janssen all mixed up, when we take just Moderna vaccines, we found that the top 30 slots of Moderna most toxic vaccines, they all end in 20A. They all do. I mean, basically every single Moderna vaccine that has historically been associated with more than 1,780 adverse reactions and numerous deaths, all of them end in 20A. All the ones beneath that, it changes and it becomes 21A. 21A is generally less toxic than 20A. It's about half the toxicity. If you go back to the top of the web page,
yeah.
That's it. And if you click on clusters, please, it's just above donate. That's it. Now, this will be a useful guide for people who want to try and be a bit safer. What you're looking at is the Pfizer batches. Now, curiously, just looking at this graph, you can see it's not random. Along the x-axis, you have all of the batch codes for Pfizer. Now, Pfizer have given all their batch codes alphabetically. So, for example, you've got EK, then after K comes L, so you got EL. After L comes M, so you got EM. After M comes then EN, then EO, then EP, then ER, then EU, then EW, then EX, and so on. So it's all alphabetical. Now, what they've done is if you look at the toxicity of the clusters, you'll see that EN, which is the kind of turquoise colored, EN is the highest, EN. And then after EN, we see that EO is slightly lower. Then ER is a slightly lower toxicity. These are measured in terms of adverse reactions. So these are generating less adverse reactions. Now, EW is even lower still. EW is about half the toxicity of EN, and it's EW that they're giving to the children. And it's EW which is causing huge amounts of disability and death in children currently. I'll show you that later. As we go beyond the E series, we come to the F series. And the F series consists of FA, FC, FD, FE, FF. So again, it's alphabetical. And as we go through the F series, you notice it carries on declining in toxicity. So what they've been doing here is testing different toxicities of different, they've been testing different toxicity levels. In pharmaceutical language, they've been dosage testing, and in animal testing, what they call it is the LD50, lethal dose 50. It's the dosage required to kill half the population, half the people, or half the animals. But what they're doing instead is doing this dosage testing on human subjects, because as you probably are aware, and as the audience is probably aware, this is an experiment. This is phase 1, 2, 3. It's not phase 3, it's phase 1, 2, and 3. If you look at the Pfizer documents, it says they've combined phase 1, 2, and 3 into one. So what they're doing here is dosage testing upon the American population. You're basically all guinea pigs, and they've been testing different dosages, carefully labeling those dosages with different alphabetical codes, and then monitoring and recording the effects. For what, I don't know. Maybe later they're going to deploy different levels, or maybe send different levels to different populations. It's very much tied in with eugenics to decide who gets what batch at what toxicity. You could take out any political group, any ethnic group, any religious group. You could literally take them out with this. It's so easy. You just basically tell them to go for their vaccination, tell them all the vaccines are equal, and just put them all on the EN batch. And they wouldn't know any difference, except they'd all get very ill, very weak, and very politically inactive very fast. So that's what we're looking at here. So that's the Pfizer. So you've seen how Pfizer toxicity decreases with alphabet, as the alphabet ascends. Now let's go down a bit more to the next chart, which is Moderna. That's it here. Now Moderna has categorized their vaccines, again, according to the alphabet. And it's the same letters, J, K, L, M, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And this is the output for the toxicity of each of those batches, calculated in terms of number of deaths caused by on average for each batch within each of these groups. So within each of these groups, you've got like hundreds of batches. but the range of toxicity of those batches is represented by these bars. And as you can see, J, K, L, and M are all highly toxic and have quite a large spread. And then a new series starts, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, which has progressively lower toxicity as the alphabet ascends. Again, so in both of these series, as the alphabet ascends, toxicity more or less decreases. And the other thing to note is that J, K, L, and M batches, they're not batches, they're more like categories. But those categories, the batches in those categories, J, K, L, and M, the batches in those categories all end in 20A, which we mentioned before, whereas A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, the batches in all of those categories ends in 21A. So you can see when I said before that the 20A category was more toxic than the 21A category. Well, here, both of those two super categories break down into alphabetical groups, and as the alphabet ascends in both of those categories, the toxicity decreases systematically. So again, this looks to any pharmaceutical scientist, this would look as if different toxicity levels had been carefully labeled by the scientists involved in order to monitor, in order to allocate the different batches, the different toxicities to different populations and monitor their effects. One thing scientists do really well, and that is they are good at labeling things so they can monitor the effects of the different experimental conditions. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. They're the carefully labeled different toxic levels with a batch code, which is alphabetical. And the only reason they would do that would be to monitor and record the effects, like the number of deaths, the kinds of disabilities. They know full well that this is going on. This isn't hidden from them. They know this 100%.
Is this, for instance, this orange one, the K, is this still available to people, or is this in the past? They're done with it and they're on to the next one. Is this still floating around in the world?
Good question. What's happened is when the vaccines started in 2020 and early 2021, that was when the J, K, L, and M series was being deployed. And it was mainly deployed to senior citizens, to our old, to veterans of the wars, to people who were advanced in age. And it would have killed a huge number of them. And then with the progression, we find that these vaccines become obsolete when they reach expiry date. Now, the groups which are still being, up to this day, the ones that are still being deployed are B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. They are apparently lower toxicity in terms of deaths, but as I mentioned, we need to look also at disabilities, because as deaths are put out of the picture, pharma, we've seen what they did with the foreign batches. They may well be only decreasing death in order to increase disability so they can actually make an income stream from it. So we need to look at that. But certainly, this is an interesting phenomenon. We're looking at progressive decreasing toxicity as the alphabet ascends. And you should say, well, that's a coincidence, because that's exactly what we found in Pfizer, even more clearly in Pfizer. So is both Moderna and Pfizer doing the same dosage testing? Possibly. It looks like they may be. I mean, it's something we should bear in mind. One thing that does appear immediately from this is that we're looking at a high degree of variation, again, between batches, a high degree of variation. The government cannot claim that all of these batches are consistently the same. They're just not. For a start, they have different toxicity levels, but they also have different amounts of spread within each category. All of the ones ending 20A, the first four, J, K, L, and M, they have very wide variation in their effects. They are a different alphanumeric series, and they are at a different toxicity level to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. So it would be fair to hypothesize that the JKLM batches are actually deploying a different substance, not even necessarily just a higher concentration, because they have characteristics which suggest that they may have deployed something different. Why else would the degree of spread or variation within these groups be so wide compared to the ones that subsequently followed? If we go down a bit more
Sure.
on this page.
I have a question though. What about
Yeah.
the people that are administering these injections? Maybe they
Yes.
are listening to this right now and they're like, I didn't know this. How would the person administering the injection know to check which batch? I mean, obviously, I'm just following orders. I got this thing. I got to inject in this person. How would they know to do
They
that?
know what the batch codes are. They know the batch code that they're told to inject, and it would take them a minute to actually just check. They
could come to this website and check.
Yeah, they can go to, there's a couple of websites they can go to. Howbad.info. Howbad.info is one website. What I've done is I've also uploaded the information to another website called howbadismybatch.com. Howbadismybatch.com, because it's easier for people to remember. Howbadismybatch.com. And that means that any professional, any teacher, any nurse, any doctor, anyone involved in administering the vaccines can actually see that there is variation between them, and they can actually check just to see how many deaths and disabilities are associated with a particular batch. And hopefully then they can choose a different batch. You see, I mean, even if they're basically, I think they shouldn't be injecting people with this experimental vaccine period, owing to the fact that it's already killed a huge number of people. They should be stopped it. And it's also hurt a lot of people. But if they really, really, really must inject them with something, then they should at least not choose a highly toxic one. They should give them the most harmless one they can find from the data. And that would be the logical thing for any doctor to do, because after all, they're claiming that all the batches are equal, that none are more toxic than others. So if they're claiming that, then what's the problem with just giving them a really, really harmless one that hasn't got so many adverse effects? It's a bit like a criminal record. If someone's committed, say, 100 murders, do you want that person to look after your children if you can see on their record that they've killed 100 people? However, if you've also got on your record something which has only maybe killed one person or only injured one person, doesn't it make sense for a doctor or nurse to choose the less harmful but supposedly equal alternative? Obviously, this may never materialize because we're no longer living in a society where people are thinking rationally. There's too much brainwashing has taken place, and it's kind of hard to understand the level of compliance with the government that some people are showing. It's one thing to comply out of fear and out of fear of consequences. It's another thing to carry on complying and actually, day by day, administering stuff that you know to be toxic. Hopefully, this will wake people up. People will begin to see the variation, which they probably were not aware of before. And then it will start waking people up. People will become that little bit extra cautious. And that's all we need. All we need is a little bit more caution. And people are scared of the pandemic, but they should also be cautious about the batches because they're not all equal. If they can be cautious about the batches, then that's going to save lives. Just that a bit of extra caution, a bit of extra foresight, it's going to save a lot of lives, a lot of children, a lot of adults.
I have a question.
A lot of adults. Yeah.
I have a question. The question is, all right, we already ran through if you have to get this for work, and they're supposed to be exactly the same all the way through, unless, of course, we are in an experiment. And I believe the emergency use authorization allowed for this experiment to go on. We're still in an experiment. They don't have to pay anybody to be an experimental. Sometimes when you go to participate in an experiment, they'll pay you. Most of the times they will, but this time they don't have to. The government will be like, so they're not paying anybody. They can't sue anybody. They've made it clear that the drug company isn't going to be able to be sued. The government's going to be able to sue. You can't sue anybody. And what you said about the brainwashing, that people are either very, very afraid or why? All right, that takes me to my question, what got me on this tip. So now they're talking about boosters. So now people watch this interview with you and me, and they're like, oh, you got to get your booster, or you can't go to the restaurant.
Yes.
How, now, maybe if a lot of people, I bet, don't even know what batch they had when they got their first inoculation with this.
Yes.
How would they know how that was going to react with the booster? Or is the booster going to be the same as they got before?
Well, there's no, we can assume that repeated vaccination of the same substance is just going to accumulate more and more damage, because if a vaccine causes damage, if the first shot causes damage, then the second shot of the same substance would actually accumulate more damage. It will be re-exposing your body to a second dose of a toxin. And what Pfizer found in its own research, Pfizer did a 2-dosage test, first dose, second dose. Second dose was consistently producing 5 times the amount of adverse reactions compared to the first. Now, presumably, they were giving people exactly the same dose, except it was a second dose. So we can see from that the dosage, the doses have a cumulative effect over time. So first dose, second dose is worse than first dose. Third dose is likely to be more bad effects than the second dose. Fourth dose will be worse than the third dose. And if the government, and it's generally felt that the governments of the world are not acting in people's interests with these vaccines simply because they have employed so much deception and coercion. And those two things suggest that the vaccines are harmful. But why are they harmful? Well, if the government wants to harm people, they can't do it very overt. They can't be overt about that. They can't be overt about harming people. They have to do it incrementally. Otherwise, they'd be thrown out of power. And the only way to do it incrementally is to do it in a series of boosters. A series of boosters, maybe 2 a year over a period of years, each one progressively damaging the recipients. So we have to be aware that that's a possibility. So a repeated exposure to something which is harmful will achieve an effect in the end, which could actually explain why the government is doing it in small steps, and why someone who's got natural immunity is totally ignored, and they say you still have to have a vaccine. And someone who's had one vaccine is totally ignored and told they have to have 2 vaccines. Someone who's had 2 is totally ignored and told they have to have 3. And it goes on and on and on for ad infinitum, until a person is so full of synthetic RNA that it's highly probable they would die. Because if you keep on injecting mRNA into people and it keeps on entering cells, causing the cells to produce more spike protein, which then causes the immune system to attack those cells. If you keep on doing that, what's the end result? It's going to be bad. And if people have had 1 or 2 vaccines, now is the time to stop taking them and reassess the safety of these vaccines. Don't just carry on. If you're alive and well and you've had 2 vaccines, now's the time to stop and reassess. If you carry on, you're putting yourself into harm's way. The government, if this was safe, the government wouldn't be forcing people out of jobs. Perfectly healthy people being forced out of jobs, many of them doctors and nurses. The government is acting in the most untrustworthy way at the moment. So people need to just be wary of the government and to look at the data on these jabs so far, how many deaths, how many disabilities they've caused. If they really must be vaccinated, no one can stop them. I am not against taking away people's freedom to actually be vaccinated if they want to, but just be aware that you need to choose not to take a highly toxic one, because then you'll avoid hurting yourself.
Okay, so if the doctors who are suggesting to their patients, like I have a doctor who has been relentlessly telling me to go get this vaccine, and I've not gotten it. Do they get paid to have their patients onto database?
Yeah, and hospitals get paid too. They get paid money for every vaccine they administer. I think I've heard it's something like £12, but if you're doing like 100 people a day, that's that's £1,200 a day. It's about, I don't know how many dollars, but it's a lot. And some doctors have realized the damage they're causing and they've stopped. I had one doctor, he vaccinated 14 patients in a row with a particular batch, and every single one of them went into intensive care, every single one in a row. Then
that was a bad batch.
Yeah, that was a bad batch. And then he basically compared that to his other patients who had a different batch, and they were all fine. So, but he then stopped. He realized he'd made a mistake and he stopped. And what we need is simply for people to wake up and just use their highly advanced rational skills, which all doctors have got, and just look at the data and make their own decision based on the data that they see with their own eyes. They all see the adverse reactions happening, but the cloud of propaganda and emotional coercion that they're all living under, it dampens their own minds. What they need to do is just reawaken their brilliance, their cognitive abilities, and say, hang on a sec, this is damaging 30% of my patients. I need to slow down and reassess. And if enough doctors do that, then it will have an effect on the population. They may lose their jobs, because what the general policy of government is, if a doctor shows vaccine hesitancy, he's no longer a doctor.
Yes.
But On the positive side, a couple of positives is, firstly, he's going to save a lot of lives, but also once this current regime is ended, he will be re-employed and given an advanced position. And all the doctors who have faithfully administered a kind of a toxin to so many millions, they won't have a position. They will be untrustworthy. They won't have a position. So it's only a few years. You may be out of a job for a couple of years, but then you'll be returned to the full job. And all the doctors who have said no to this vaccine because of the adverse effects, all of those doctors are going to be re-employed as soon as this current craziness is over. So it's worth thinking about that. You know, you maybe lose short term, but you're going to gain long term. It's really worth remembering if you're a doctor.
Yeah, because I have interactions with a lot of doctors, nurses, and there are a few doctors, they know they're going to lose their license not by giving out this vaccine. So they're batting down the hatches, figuring out what they're going to do. And I know some nurses that lost their jobs at the hospital, like in the middle of a pandemic, like you said, you brought it up, in the middle of a health emergency where getting rid of the qualified, healthy people that have lived through this whole thing for more than a year and a half, going on 2 years now, getting rid of them. Yes. It's got to start making sense to people, but it's amazing to me that people haven't really thought this through, because we are in a clinical trial. I want to show the, where is it, the study. This is it in the US. Here it is, clinical trials. Here it is. It's going to be going until various phases, blah, 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 blah. And here's where it finishes. I want to see what happens. All this stuff, we go, oh, coronavirus is cured in May 15th, 2023. So everybody has to keep that in mind. We're still in a clinical trial. And when they say it's 100 or 95% effective, people have to understand the marketing language they're using, relative versus absolute risk reduction. And I'll put links to this as a 2-minute thing explaining how the marketing department's able to say that, because it's fun with numbers, you know, but we'll go back to what you got going on over here, Batch. And I'll put all those links under our thing when we get it up. All right, so here we are. Which page do you want to go to now? Keep going down.
You can go down this page and see what else there is. This is a typical Moderna code. As you can see, consists of three numbers at the start, which is the batch number, which basically just tells the order in which the batch was produced. L is the alphabetic letter. It can be K, J, K, L, or M, or A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H in the middle. And that denotes toxicity. And you can work out from that letter number of adverse reactions and toxicity. Because as I said, as the alphabet increases, the toxicity decreases. And 20A at the end, as I said, is like the super category. So the ones that were 20A on the end had the highest toxicity. 21A was lower. And if you go down a little bit further, please, just to see this table underneath, this is if you go, that's it. This is all of the Moderna only. Now, if we look at the top of that, we can see that all of the ones at the beginning all end in 20A, every single one of the most toxic. Because here we've got the number of adverse reactions in the second column. So the first one, 039K20A, has 4,985 reports of adverse reactions, and those are decreasing as you go down. But all of the batch codes in the first column, all the top 30 end in 20A. That's beyond coincidence that they just happen to be. So that shows you straight away something odd's going on with the batch codes. Now, you won't find many 20A batches around now. A new lot of batches have appeared. You could say farmers doing another experiment. But my job on how bad is your batch.com, my job is to monitor and report the adverse effects for each batch as it appears. So what I've just done on howbadismybatch.com is I have just published the adverse reactions for the last 3 months only. So it will show what these new batches are, what their batch codes are, and what adverse reactions are associated with those different batch codes. So whereas this is historical now, because this was like 2021, that's when the 28 batches were administered in January, February 2021. The latest information I've put on howbadismybatch.com, and I will continue to do so until the government decides to attack theirs and take it down completely. Because obviously the publication of adverse reactions is something which the government doesn't really like too much because it takes away farmers' profit. However, if they leave up theirs, I'll continue reporting on it. If they take down theirs, we'll be in the dark. We have to be aware that they may well do that. If you go to children, if we go to the top of the webpage and click on children, so there's one called children, there it is, yeah. Now, the first chart shows Pfizer. This is back to Pfizer again. Now, what we're looking at, what we can see is that some of the vaccines administered are producing an awful lot of bad reactions in the children. These all belong to exactly the same alphanumeric series called the EW series, EW, though we also have strong spikes for the FA series and the FC series and the ER series. So basically, the EW series is predominantly very, very dangerous, and it's causing a lot of disability and a lot of deaths in the children, mainly by heart failure. What the vaccines are doing is they're generating the spike protein, which appears on the cells of the blood vessels and in the cells of the heart muscles, because the vaccine, when it's injected into the muscle, goes into the blood supply and circulates around the body in the blood vessels, and a lot of it ends up in the heart. And when it goes there, it causes the cells in the heart muscles to produce a spike protein, which is part of the virus. The immune system recognizes the spike as foreign because it belongs to the virus and attacks the heart muscles. And you get an autoimmune disease called myocarditis, which kills young people quite quickly or maims them. It's killed about 230 sportsmen. They've just died when they're out doing athletics or playing football. They've just dropped down dead because when the immune system attacks the heart muscles, it causes a heart attack. And, it's especially a strong effect in young men because young men if their heart is damaged, it has a more immediate effect. So if we go down a bit more below that.
For children, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're on children. So go down again. Now, this is Pfizer. Now, all the EW range is the green. So the green is the green spike is the EW range. And you can see the toxicity, which was calculated by taking every single EW batch, every single ER batch, and so on, and plotting its number of adverse reactions on the y-axis. We end up with, we can see quite clearly that the EW range, which is currently given to children, is between about 1,200 and 2,500 adverse reactions. So that's the range. And it basically is not that far below the EN range. It's still very, very toxic. It's not harmless. Like, to be harmless, it would have to be on the 0 level. Like, but these are right up there. And this is what's been given to children. Now, if you go down beneath that, please. If you look at this table here shows that we have 29 deaths, 120 permanent disabilities, and 264 life-threatening situations, and 1,365 hospitalizations. That's a lot. That's a lot. So, and this is just from the beginning of the deployment to children. And these are just the ones that were reported. It's estimated, it's been calculated by about 4 different statisticians that the number of adverse reactions and deaths and so on being reported to theirs is 1/40th of the actual true number of unreported events. So if you times these all by 40, you have a good approximation of the actual number of deaths. So deaths would be, instead of 30, you'd be looking at 1,200 deaths. Instead of 120 disabilities, you'd be looking at 120 times 30. So that's 120 times 30 equals 3,600 disabled children, and so on. And this is just the start, because that's going to build up. And really, no doctor or nurse should be carrying on if they know these facts. They shouldn't carry on. They will carry on, but they shouldn't, but they will. I don't think we can actually stop them from doing what they're doing. I don't think we can sue them. I don't think we can physically stop them. I don't think we can do much. All we can do is protect ourselves and through non-compliance, and protect others by withdrawing them from places where they may be harmed. That's all we can do. We can't stop 194 countries with all their military, with all their police, with all their doctors, with all their teachers, with all their media, with all of those people pushing this agenda. We can fight, but if you fight against that kind of, what can you do? All you can actually do is educate yourself and choose to opt out. You can educate yourself and choose to opt out. And you can educate other people so more people opt out also. And by educating other people, you're building up a greater population of non-compliance, which will protect you as an individual, because you're not protected when you're alone, but when you're in a very large group, you're more protected, which means more chance of surviving this. So what I say to people is, first thing to do in this situation where you're up against a pretty much invincible enemy is, first of all, secure your own welfare. You need, if the unvaccinated people are going to be forbidden from traveling, forbidden from working, and forbidden from buying food, going into supermarkets, forbidden from buying medicines by going into hospitals, what you can do is firstly secure your own welfare. And you can do that by storing food, enough food to tide you over during the times that you're not allowed to work, putting aside money to pay for rent, then educating other people and linking up with other people actively in the local community, people that can offer you mutual aid. So linking up with other unvaxxed people who can provide services for each other is essential in the time to come. It's going to be essential to actually have people in your neighborhood who support your views and are willing to provide you with supplies that you can buy and supply you with refuge or shelter when you need to hide. And maybe supply you with medicines that you need, supply you with jobs that you need when no one else will employ you because you are unvaxxed. These things are going to be important. So forming local communities, not necessarily online, local communities face-to-face, because you're going to need face-to-face real-time help rather than online help. So you need to kind of build local hubs in every single postcode, throughout the USA, in every single postcode, in every town throughout Europe. People need to start networking and coming together to kind of form support networks so that they can get through this. And also evangelize continuously to the people who are vaccine hesitant. Just go out and speak to people about the adverse effects. Show them, testimonies of people that have been harmed. Put doubts in their minds and keep on telling other people and educating them. In that way, you're going to build your own salvation. You're going to build your own safety net, your own community that you can rely on. The expose actually created this, but here what you've got is all of the adverse event reports showing that the highest, in fact, all of the highest are all from the EW range. So the EW range, again, with the exception of one single one, which is the FA range, the whole lot is EW. And if you go down a bit more, you'll see emergency room visits. As you go down, you see the top ranking batches for causing emergency room visits are all the EW range. And this is just for children. This isn't for adults. This is number of emergency room visits for children. And it's all in the EW and FA. FA again, FA 6780. And as you go down even more, you'll see that batches are very important for determining whether they're dangerous or not. We need to know which batch we're taking. They're not all equal. The EW range again, life-threatening illnesses. And as we go down there, we'll see that they're all EW as well, except for FE. So there's a few, they're all EW except for FE, one FE. So, and disability, if we go down a bit more, we can see that the batches causing disability are nearly all EW. We've got one EN, which is interesting because EN is still being circulated. EN is one of the very toxic batches that shouldn't really be still out there. The EN batch here is still being circulated. 6207 is a very highly toxic batch code. 6200, 6201, 6202. These batches have slayed people right across Europe and the States. It's a very, very toxic batch. I'm surprised it's not at the top. But
I have a question or something to say. What if somebody, now this chart that I'm looking at the top, it says 5, the worst one, EW0191 says 5. Is that 5
Yeah.
individuals? Because
Yeah, 5 people did take
millions
it.
of people have gotten this vaccine, and 5 individuals, what, that doesn't affect me.
Yeah, well, this is only the reported ones, remember, firstly. And yeah, well, if you look at all 5, you should multiply it by 40, firstly, to get the correct figure. And yeah, I mean, what this mainly shows in relative terms is that the batches aren't equal again, because all of them are EW range, almost all of them. And EW is only one out of many series of Pfizer vaccines. So if EW is causing all the harm, and if people avoid EW, then at least they're lessening the risk that they're putting themselves through. That's all I can say. It's a relative thing, isn't it? The batches are not equal. So, yeah.
Death. Here we go with death. Okay.
Just tell them if they say, well, it's, millions of people have vaccines and only 5 got killed by that particular batch. Just say, well, do you want to put yourself at unnecessary risk? Obviously, it's your choice.
Yeah.
Again, this is deaths, and as you can see, they're nearly all EW. So, and
these EWs, they're still in circulation?
Which one? Yeah, EW is still in circulation.
Yeah, still around. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. Well, I think, is there anything else up here real quick? Because here's my other question, Craig. How are you supporting this? Because this looks like a ton of work. It's just you, basically. This is the website you're working on exclusively now. And this is a ton of work. You were cleaning the data. You emailed me and told me about cleaning the data, because there's so much to go through just to make it absorbable for people on a website like this. Are you taking donations? I see a little button for donate. I would like to bring you to that. People should. I'm going to donate. I think this is a fantastic resource. And I hope people do donate. Yeah, look at that.
Well, I just do it because I feel, when you know something and you don't tell someone, then that would make me kind of complicit. Like, for example, when I found out the batches all different toxicity, if I just didn't tell anyone and people just carried on taking toxic batches, then they're going to undergo disabilities and deaths and so on. And I would actually be guilty of not telling them. You see, it's kind of like, it's like knowing that there is a trap and literally not telling anyone there's a trap, and then they all fall in. And it's my duty to do it, so I will carry on until I'm forced not to. I have to. I have no choice in this. Having said that, I have actually provided. It's an ongoing effort because new batches are coming out every month, and these batches, they need to be assessed to find out how safe they are, and then people can make a more informed decision as to whether they want it or not. At the moment, they have been misinformed by the government, and they are not being given informed consent. But this will help them to become informed, and so it's going to protect people to some extent. And I hope doctors and nurses use it. But I have to keep up the work on a monthly basis of going through the latest batches and counting the number of deaths and number of disabilities and so on. What I can do while we're here is show them how it works. If we click on Moderna,
at the top, okay.
Yeah.
We only have 4% left of my battery, so we won't go too far into this, but go ahead. We're at Moderna, we'll go there.
Yes. Okay, now this is the Moderna interface for USA. There is one for outside USA. So if you just type in a code like 031L.
031, yeah.
L, that's it, and it comes up. So you see it appears at the top, and when all they can do then is read across, and they can see what its effects are, and that's how quick it is. And you can do this on a mobile phone or on a website. And the website to go to is
I've got at howbad.info, but there's also howbadismybatch.com.
Yeah, howbadismybatch.com.
Okay. All right, Craig, I am so appreciative of your work, and I'm so appreciative that you took time out of your life to do the Zoom meeting with me. Thank you so much. I am so proud to know you. I think you're a very special, important person. Thank you. And
Thank you very much.
And everybody who's watching this, please mirror this, copy it, send it, share it. This is important information. Everybody, shadow citizens out there, I'll see you next week. Everybody, stay safe.
Shadow Citizen with Rachael McIntosh.